Hey, I'm Aubriana, and this is a conversation series with builders, leaders, and people shaping and studying the work of change across media, technology, and AI. We talk about what's really happening beyond the headlines, what's real, what's messy, and how people are thinking about transformation that actually makes a difference. Welcome to Agents of Change, Human in the Loop. Hey everyone, welcome back to Agents of Change, Human in the Loop. Today I am joined by Matthew Fanelli from Digital Remedy. Matthew has spent his career working at the intersection of media, data, and performance, really helping brands navigate an increasingly complex advertising ecosystem. And he's bringing a perspective today that sits between strategy and execution, understanding not just where the industry is going, but what it actually takes to drive outcomes in the real world. So Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, excited to jump in and have a good discussion with you. I know you've spent a really good portion of your career in performance media and ad tech. So, give us a little bit of background. What shaped the way that you think about where the industry is today and what matters maybe versus what's just noise?
That's great. I would say to you in my career, and I've been in the space now for just about 25 years. Every time I say that, I actually can't believe that it's been that long. And really, what shaped my path and what I'm most passionate about is meeting people where they are. And I think from a technology standpoint and a fragmentation standpoint, when I think back over the course of the past 25 years and when I really started to cut my teeth in this industry, this was the days of AOL dial-up, and it was a
Yeah.
tile ad on AOL, and you were a visionary, and it was, wow, you're breaking into new media and digital media. And as technology has progressed over time and things have come to market a lot faster, one of the material impacts to us as consumers, as people, has been the fragmentation. And when I say fragmentation, really what I mean about that is we used to be on a very linear path to
Mhm.
receive information. And now we are getting bits and pieces of information, not only in a multitude of ways, but also from a multitude of devices.
Yeah.
And I think, you're familiar with this. There were a lot of studies that have been done over the past couple of years just on attention spans. What's the attention span of an adult in the United States? And one of the recent things that I've read, and I continue to read this over the years, and it hasn't changed, is the attention span of an adult in the US is estimated to be somewhere under 3 seconds, which is less than the attention span of a goldfish floating around in a bowl. I see it every day in my
Yeah.
own household. I see it with myself. So you have extremely low attention spans. We have more choices than ever before, whether that's purchasing a vehicle or looking for insurance or, looking for a box of cereal. And on top of that, we have devices that are blinking, beeping, and buzzing in front of our faces constantly.
Mhm.
Whether it's our smartphone, our iPad, our computer, our smartwatch, Nest thermostats in our home. So when I think about it from a consumer standpoint, going back to the beginning of meeting people where they are, is how, from a marketing and an advertising perspective, do we get the right message in front of the right person at the right moment in time to complete a predetermined desired action? And when you have these kind of three things, low attention spans, a lot of choices, a boatload of devices, through targeting and data and precision is really how you break through and meet people where they are. And frankly, Aubriana, that's what I'm most passionate about is how do we continue to implement change to make sure we're meeting people where they are, knowing that these things are somewhat in rotation of each other. I would say that's what keeps me, that's the path I was on, and that's what keeps me most passionate about what I do every day in my current role at Digital Remedy.
Awesome. I mean, I think you're kind of pushing towards one word that you haven't used yet, which is performance, which has kind of been like this catch-all term. Everybody's claiming performance of some sort. So, where do you think companies are actually like maybe fooling themselves when they're saying performance driven? And then the adverse of that is like, where are teams truly doing it different.
Mhm. I think where folks are fooling themselves is I think everyone likes to kind of beat their own chest, if you will, and say, we're doing great and we're doing the best. And a real life example of that is, sometimes when we continue to do the same thing over and over, the word change is very difficult.
Hmm.
And taking a hard look and having a courageous conversation about what's actually working for your business becomes somewhat difficult for folks. And great example, we were not that long ago working with a healthcare system that they had different lines of business, and it was, we're completely booked up and it's great. And, we're doing all of this advertising and, we're reaching the right people and it's great. And we actually took a hard look with them in terms of who were the folks that were booking these appointments. Their metric for performance was booking an appointment with a very specific surgeon.
Hmm.
And what I will tell you is, as we unpack that, the patients were not the ones that were booking the appointment. It was their significant others.
Hmm.
But the entire campaign and all the money that was being spent on reaching the actual target of who they wanted for the appointment, not the others.
Mm.
That's a way I think that we fool ourselves. And what I will say is the folks that are doing it well, and I would say at Digital Remedy, we do it better than everyone, is starting with what does performance look like for you?
Hmm.
What is your goal? Performance, in a lot of cases, is really in the eye of the beholder. What do I mean by that? We can look at things in a very granular way to say, we're going to measure this back to sales, online sales, in-store sales, etc. That may work for XYZ client. For another client, they may be a regional bank that's taking over another regional bank, and all they're trying to do is get their awareness up in market. That's a whole different level of performance. And there's things like brand awareness studies, et cetera, that we can surround that campaign with to prove that performance. But I think going back to the root of the question, I think we fool ourselves because we don't have the courageous conversation to say, let's actually unpack everything. Who is our audience, number one? And number two, performance is not this one size fits all across
Yeah.
everything. There are so many lines of business and services where it's not that one to one. I advertised and I can take this ad and attribute it to a sale. A lot of things that we work on don't even necessarily work that way. And going back to that fragmentation and kind of the three things, low attention spans, too many choices, and a boatload of devices, the path, right? Which is why attribution and performance is important. The path isn't necessarily linear. It's not just one thing that gets me to buy something.
Yeah, I think sometimes we do the best marketing to ourselves internally. We're like,
That's
we are
exactly
grading our
right.
own homework as an industry. I think we're getting to a place where that's not going to be acceptable anymore. There's too many tools. There's too many quick ways to measure the reality of what's happening and understanding it. Still disconnected at times. But, that kind of brings me to the next question I wanted to ask you about fragmentation versus control. And I think that the ecosystem is getting more and more fragmented. We're adding more tools, AI tools, right? And yes, that helps us do specific things quickly sometimes and more effectively, but we still have to stitch those together. So we've got more channels, more data, more tools. So from your vantage point, like where do teams like specifically in the process lose that control today? And then maybe what's that difference between teams that manage complexity versus those that get buried by it?
Mhm. I would say you bring up a really, really great point. And a lot of times I talk about paralysis by analysis,
Mm.
where we get so bogged down into the complexity and looking at every little thing that we kind of get stuck in the mud. And what I would say is, I think when we look at performance and the fragmentation and really observing, and I'll use that word very deliberately, observing what is moving the needle for something, it goes back to, again, what does performance look like for me? And it's the analysis of what am I currently doing? Am I running traditional broadcast? Am I doing CTV, OTT? Am I doing display? Am I doing some social, some search? What is my output of that? What am I happy with and what am I unhappy with? And what are my goals? And then it's looking at all of these things in those pieces to say, how can I analyze what am I getting out of this? And tinkering with that mix because we know the path is not linear. What I am seeing, and it's actually really funny that you bring it up because I have two very specific real life examples of the overusage of AI, the complications there, and where I believe without specificity things are going to go. On one of my team meetings just yesterday, there are two folks that I would say probably rely on AI maybe slightly more than others. And I'll frame this by saying AI is good for a starting point. It is good to get something going, in my view. It is not a be all end all. And I do not believe it is a point where it can be left to itself without human thinking, human intervention, a little bit of magic, and a whole lot of creativity. I think that still remains and is still very important.
Hmm.
I am on the receiving end of a lot of these, I will say, documents and emails that are so clearly AI generated
Hmm.
that it has the adverse effect on me.
Yeah.
Meaning where someone used it to try to make things simpler, better, or maybe break through to me, it had the complete reverse reaction where I'm like, you put zero thought into this, especially the ones, Aubriana, where I get where my name is wrong. It doesn't even say Dear Matt, it's like Dear Jake because copy paste AI.
Yep.
Where I do think it has a benefit is I think the efficiency is perhaps in the starting point, it's in time, specifically for performance and just overall, kind of media marketing mix. I like a lot of it from the perspective of what are other folks doing? What is the industry saying? How can I use it as a research tool to help versus giving me the answer left to itself to go and do something for me?
Hmm.
That's where I really like to see it. Just this morning, I was actually looking up and I just put it into AI really quick. Where is the French Open going to be held, this year? And what are some hotels, restaurants, et cetera, in that area? Again, research driven. Down at the bottom now, I'm getting ads
Hmm.
more frequently. Best hotels in Paris, best luxury hotels in Paris. Goes back to that ease of execution. And that's where I think, the kind of research versus advertising is going to start to blend. We're going to see more and more businesses, services, et cetera, interject themselves into this intersection, which, by the way, helps to continue fragmentation because now it's a whole other venue where things are getting injected
Yeah.
injected into.
No, I hear you. Sometimes you're reading things and like within the first couple sentences, you know that this was just very generated. And I think there's, refinement of ideas is a great usage of AI for content today. I do that a lot where I'm like, I talk to it, here's my idea, help me reframe this, help me put it more succinctly, help me say this more eloquently. I want it to be this, I want it to be this tone. I think that's really good. But also to your point, I don't know, after, a long-term relationship with ChatGPT is started misspelling my name all of a sudden, just putting two N's in it. I'm like, where is this coming from? And who, like what is happening here? I'm so offended.
Hmm.
So I think, yes, everybody's talking about AI. We got, 5 minutes into our conversation before it came up, which I think is maybe like a good success metric for us. But there's very few people that are operationalizing this in meaningful ways. So, where do you see like real tangible impact, maybe in your business at Digital Remedy? Like, where are you
Hmm.
seeing this? And then, we've talked about where the industry is storytelling a little bit on. I think my question is more geared towards like the tools and technology and the AI readiness infrastructure inside of the ad tech ecosystem or the media ecosystem
Mhm.
today? Like where are you seeing this tangible impact? And then, what do you feel like is still a little bit smoke and mirrors?
That's a great question. For us specifically, through Echo and Scout, which are our platforms, they're based in AI. It's all about performance. It's all about the research. And what do I mean by that? It's having the ability across to do some predictive analytics. So
Mhm.
when we're having a meaningful conversation with an agency, client, etc., and we know their metric for success is perhaps, app installs as an example, we're going to know the right places to be, right? We're going to find that audience and get closer to finding them where they are. So for us, it's having the ability where people were kind of bogged down in spreadsheets of,
Yeah.
okay, it was this geo target, this audience, this type of creative. This is what, they were looking at for success, looking at 85 different spreadsheets as an
Hmm.
example and saying, well, we know in these environments, we think those people are there. We're harnessing AI in a really meaningful way to get a better outcome and prediction for our clients.
Hmm.
Now, we also have really great people in our client services team that's harnessing the power of this
Yeah.
to look at this. But it's a really cohesive way to get 5 steps ahead to what performance may look like for someone. Now, what I will say is, I think a lot of the smoke and mirrors that I see in the industry is when there is not a visual dashboard for someone to log into. It's like, oh, we only use it. It's our quote unquote black box and it's behind the scenes. As soon as I hear like it's our own algorithm, it's our black box, there's no way for you to log in, whether someone wants to log in or not.
Hmm.
And listen, in some cases, I'm sure people actually have that. Generally, that's Aubriana where my antenna tends to go up
Yeah.
because it's like, actions speak louder than words. It's show me. Let me see what that dashboard looks like. Let me
Yeah.
see those results. Let me see how that works. And for us, I am extremely passionate about our word being our bond as a business. We perform better, I would say, than everyone in the space. Our service is exemplary. However, you have to show that and you have to prove that. You can't just say it. That's how we're harnessing the power of a lot of what technology has afforded us to do.
Hmm.
And we show it. We say it and we show it versus just saying it. When we just say it, that's where my antenna definitely go up.
Yeah. Well, thinking about humans in the loop, you mentioned how you have a great team over at Digital Remedy. I think that's so important. How we are, one, I think just building up our team and investing in people as much as technology. But sometimes people can also be a little bit of a blocker, barriers. I know from, my experience in this industry, it's really interesting to hear what the client wants sometimes, right? So let's be honest, like sometimes the blocker isn't the tech, or maybe the agency, but it's the client themselves. So where do you see maybe brands holding themselves back right now? Do you feel like, there's something that needs to change potentially for them to unlock better outcomes?
I think in my experience, what I've seen, I think everyone outwardly professes to say change is great and I love change. And the reality is, most people don't really like change. They don't. It's uncomfortable, sometimes awkward, but out of being uncomfortable and being slightly awkward is where you grow.
Yeah.
One of the things, that I always share is I've been in the space, as I said, for, over 25 years. I spent well over a decade in my last role before I joined the team here. Doing something different is uncomfortable, but that's how you grow. And what I would say is, I think very, very specifically at the brand level, it's we've been doing this for pick a number of years, a decade, 20 years, 30 years. In some cases, there's brands we work with where they've been in business for 60 plus years
Yeah.
and they think they know what works. And what I always use as the example of the holdback is the story of Toys R Us. Great marketing case study. Toys R Us nationally here in the United States, and you'll remember this probably as a kid. There was nothing better than getting like a great report card and my parents saying, "Hey, you get a good report card, we're going to take you to Toys R Us."
Hmm.
And why do I bring up Toys R Us? Toys R Us had the opportunity to be the Amazon of toys, and they turned it down because they said, we want people here in store. We want the kids to have the emotional, right, with their parents. They like this, then they buy that, etc. And unfortunately, we all know what happened to Toys R Us. My children now think toys show up in a box and land on your front doorstep because that's how they get delivered. And I
Yeah.
think that is a great example when I talk to brands about like when I hear, well, we've done it this way for 20 years and it works. And it's like, well, Toys R Us did it that way for 50 years and it worked. You have to start to look. But I do also think on the other side, you need to recognize that change is difficult. I think you can't just go full throttle into anything, but you need to be open to testing and looking at things differently.
Hmm.
And where we intersect there is take a hard look at the research. Take a hard look at the research. Meet your consumers where they are. Do the research first to figure out where are they.
Yeah.
Because if you've been, just as an example, spending 98% of your budget on traditional, and all of a sudden you actually look at that research and it's like, but wait a second, 80% of my consumer base is not consuming traditional media. We've got to pivot and we've got to switch a couple of things.
Yeah.
That's where I see that holdback, Aubriana, and I think using examples and, really kind of imploring people, even if it's not a big deal, just make a slight change, test something, try something, makes the world of difference.
Yeah. So it sounds like if you had to say one area that the industry is getting wrong, is it just being adverse to change or the friction that makes them improve and better?
I would completely agree with that. And I think specifically when someone is doing something and they kind of think it works, testing and changing and getting over that hurdle is just difficult. It's like test something, anything, move it a little bit. Carve out. I would also say to anyone very directly, in any one of your marketing budgets, you should carve out a portion of that just for testing every single year.
Yeah.
Try something new, be smart about it, pressure test it, but carve out a portion of that budget to test something new. Know where your audience is at and meet them there and then test new things. I'm
Yep.
not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we're moving and consumers are very fickle. We're in 1,000 different directions all at once. We have to test to stay relevant.
Yeah, we do. Well, obviously, this podcast is called Agents of Change, and I get to ask every guest this. It's one of my favorite things to ask. But what does it mean to you being an agent of change, like right now in practice and not in theory? And then personally, where are you trying to push things forward?
That's a great question. Change to me, frankly, means making myself uncomfortable every single week. What is my routine professionally that I'm like, oh, this is what I've done for 25 years, and how do I do that differently?
Mm.
Great example of that. Great example is as the CRO of Digital Remedy, and I take it super seriously. I do not ask anyone on my team to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. I will help them prospect. I will help them cold call. I will do that. I had a methodology for how I did that. Every week, I'm trying something different. I'm trying something different. One of the most uncomfortable things for me in that very, very small sliver of my responsibility is doing what I would call like quirky emails because they don't resonate with me. So it's the things where it's like, hey, should I give up now? I promise if you get back to me, I'll buy you a Starbucks. That doesn't resonate with me. It's so uncomfortable and frankly slightly cringy to me. I have pushed myself out of the comfort zone to do that. I will get back to you hopefully on another podcast and let you know if it works. That's what's on my agenda this week is how can I be a little bit cringier in my outreach and see if it works. People tell me that it stands out and it's a little bit different. Professionally, that's I would say something that is super important to me. Um, and every week I'm always exploring like what can I do different that feels a little bit uncomfortable.
I love that. And I also love that you are saying you're trying to be cringier. That's
Yeah. You don't
that
hear that often, I bet.
no, I don't, but that's fun. So I always ask the guest to leave a question for the next guest. And last podcast, I had Patrick Shea on, and he left this really thoughtful question. He talked about now this is we took a step out of ad tech and media for a second, and I thought this was really interesting. And Matthew, you have children, I have children, and you likely spend a lot of time at organized sports. We were talking about that before we started recording. And he was talking about, the rise right now in experiences. And, I go to an AAU basketball tournament and drop $200 just to get in on a Saturday and Sunday to watch my own kids play basketball after I've already paid, for the league and everything else. So we spend a lot of time in tech and digital ecosystems, but there's this entire category of brick and mortar and real world businesses that are thriving outside of that lens. So the two parts to his question are, what can we learn from those types of businesses that have nothing to do with AI or digital transformation? Perhaps, arguably, you could say they do. And on the flip side, what's one simple thing that those businesses could adopt from how we have traditionally thought in tech without overcomplicating it?
Wow, that is a very thoughtful question. What I
Yeah.
will say is, I think those brick and mortar businesses that are thriving, and this is actually a place, and I'll describe it very quickly, that Aubriana, you and I don't live far from each other. So you probably will know this brick and mortar that I'm talking about. It is a local pharmacy slash kind of catch-all store. And why do they do so well and why are they flourishing, frankly, is last minute. It's all about last minute. We need a last minute birthday gift. We need a last minute card. We need balloons. We need very tangible things that even though Amazon same day delivery works, I can't wait for it. My wife can't wait for it, and my kids can't wait for it. And I think what is the applicable part of that? It's all about appealing to the person in that exact moment.
Mm,
It's how do you know there's a need right now? Right now, I have a need. How can you appeal to that in a meaningful way? And I will say, specifically around big birthday season, graduation season, for those of you that have one of these types of stores, you'll get this. This place is packed with people. And by the way, they charge a premium for everything that is there. It is not like you're getting a great value on anything,
mhm.
but we are all in motion. Because to your point about sports with kids, I know our agenda here for my wife and I, between our work lives, our kids' lives, going to school, extracurricular activities, there is constantly, I would say, at least twice a week, oh man, we forgot. We have a birthday party to go to. We need a card. Or, frankly, it's a theme day at school. We have theme days at school coming out of our
Yeah.
ears. You need a yellow shirt. You need this. Those are the retail businesses that are thriving. And I think if you could take that brick and mortar where it's ease and it's immediacy and apply that in a meaningful way to the tech
Mhm.
world, we're doing it in some cases. I mean, frankly, part of that's the Amazon model, but how do you get even better there? That is the holy grail.
Yeah. Or if you sell Neatos, I don't know if that's all the rage in your household, but it is like every corner
Oh,
store is sold out. It's just like latching on to the one thing because you know that once they come in there and they get that one thing, then that's the sticky factor, right? Then they're going to buy five other things that come with it. Oh, I've got this birthday party coming up, as you mentioned, or I might as well just go ahead and grab a pack of batteries that I need, or whatever it may be,
that's
right? You
right.
just like cha-ching, ringing it out.
Aubriana, the Nito craze is outrageous in my house, and we are actually on following a local store that sells them on Instagram, so we know exactly when they drop,
Oh
so
my
you
gosh.
can get in line that day to go and buy them. That is a great example of the craze. Labubu was there also. Now I feel
Yeah.
like we moved into the Nitos.
Yes, as I've been calling them, they're Wuntos, not Nitos.
Yeah.
But
I
here we
love
are.
that. I love it.
All right, well, you get to pay it forward. What is a question that you would like to leave for the next person? Something maybe you're genuinely curious about how someone else would answer, something that you've been thinking about
Yeah,
lately.
I love that. Speaking of kids, I think about how we are exposed to content and information and how we make purchasing decisions every single day. I am always curious from my colleagues in the space, what do they think the impact will be on the next generation? And the example that I would use is, and again, I'm probably dating myself, is the Dewey Decimal System and the card catalog and the way that we would use a library in the past. That's gone. My kids don't even know what that is. Future outlook on the impact of AI and technology and the way that we consume. What do they think that impact will be on future generations to come?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm excited to ask that one.
Yeah.
Matthew, this has been such a pleasure having a conversation with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think what stands out to me is how you really brought this full circle, right? You started with focusing on people and like where to meet them. How do you meet them where they are? And I think we've started there and we ended up there. And I love that we kept literally humans in the loop throughout the conversation. So to everyone listening, if you got value from this, please share it with someone who's thinking through some of these same challenges. And as always, stay curious and honest about what's real and keep doing the work to become an agent of change. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
All right.